So one day, I will be important enough to introduce our main speaker. Today is not that day, okay? Instead, I'm gonna introduce the person who will introduce our main speaker this evening. It's one of our seniors, Ashley Reen, who's exceptional. She's a philosophy and humanities double major. She has been accepted to pursue a graduate degree in philosophy. I won't mention where, because she hasn't given me permission to do so, but it's pretty awesome, okay? It's somewhere on the Northeast. Really awesome school. Okay. That's all I'm gonna tell you. But please, with a thunderous round of applause, let's welcome Ashley Reen here.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dr. Perez. So I'm Ashley Reen, like you just said, and Dr. Camacho asked me if I would be willing to give the introduction to his lecture, What's the Point of Education, Love, and the End of Learning? And of course, I said yes, with no small part being that he's also about to grade my midterm paper, so there's some stakes involved. Dr. Camacho has taught in the Humanities Department since 2021 and the ACS program since 2019, where he was awarded the Junior Faculty Award for Excellence in Teaching by Villanova in 2020. In addition to teaching, Dr. Camacho has also been the Associate Director of the Augustinian Institute since 2019. Along with some of you here today, Dr. Camacho was my ACS teacher freshman year, and he was my first introduction to the Humanities Department. Along with a good, true, beautiful cohort in the Faith and Reason cohort for ACS, Dr. Camacho also teaches classes in the Humanities Department such as Problem of Love, Augustine and Antiquity, and Human Person, all which I would highly recommend. In his classroom, Dr. Camacho tries to awaken students to the wonder that is the beginning of authentic intellectual inquiry through encountering great works of philosophy, literature, and art. Rather than spilling out information he expects his students to recite, Dr. Camacho encourages each student to become an active participant in their own pursuit of the truth. Along with a couple tangents about his kids, each lesson comes with an undercurrent of a genuine existential peril that can accompany the search for wisdom, as fidelity to the truth can be both difficult and dangerous. At times, it can even require a willingness to change one's very life. Sticking true to the Augustinian tradition, Dr. Camacho shapes this pursuit under the context of conviviality, the art of living and learning together shaped by one's love for the good. In this way, the conversion of one's mind and heart to the truth is no longer an individual endeavor, but one that can only be achieved through shared inquiry. It is this shared inquiry which Dr. Camacho and the Humanities Department encourages in every class, one which facilitates both the students and the professors' continual fidelity to and search for the truth. Now, without further ado, here's Dr. Camacho and his lecture, What's the Point of Education, Love, and the End of Learning?
Can you hear me okay? Yes, no?
Yes.
Eddie, was that a kind of?
Yeah.
Okay, how about now?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. Thank you, Ashley. It's really good to be with you this evening, and I'm especially grateful to all of you for coming out. The weather is really warm and gorgeous. The light is stretching out longer, and instead you're in here. About 40 minutes seems a little short, Dr. Perez, but you're in here for however long I'm going to keep talking. So many of my students are here this evening, and I'm really moved by that. My current students and my former students as well. It's hard to express what you mean to me, Ashley, what you mean to me, and all my students, what you mean to me. I'm going to talk tonight about some dialogues by Plato, and a line from Plato's Phaedrus comes to mind. I'm paraphrasing, but what Socrates says to Phaedrus is something that I think about often with regard to all of you, my students. And that's, if I did not know you, I would not know myself. I'm incredibly moved by the generosity of your presence tonight and in the classroom and in my life. So thank you. Also, if you're in any of my 2 current classes, the fact that you were required to come tonight according to the syllabus does not lessen in any way my admiration for your presence here tonight. Like many of you, I've spent the past many springs sitting in this auditorium, listening in awe to humanities professors who were first my teachers, some of them, and now my colleagues and my friends. I mean, just look at this group of brilliant scholars and incredible teachers and amazing human beings. When I first started thinking about what I would say many months ago, tonight, I thought it might be a good idea to watch some of the former spring humanities lectures, which, by the way, you can find on YouTube if you search for Humanities Villanova Spring Lectures. I highly recommend this to all of you to do, but in my case, it was a huge mistake. I mean, put yourself in my shoes. Imagine how intimidated you would be after watching a lecture delivered with intelligence, poise, elegance, and wit by Dr. Mrs. Tomko. That talk, by the way, is entitled, "What Are You Laughing At? Humanizing Humor in an Age of Snark." Even the title, God, my heart. There's no way I can live up to the Tomko standard, the Mrs. Tomko standard. So I realized this hours and hours into watching these videos, so I came up with a plan. This is the plan. I'm just going to steal their ideas. I've put in the work, like hours of watching, so I'm just going to recycle their stuff. I've already done this, actually. You guys are sitting here thinking I'm going to say something new, but look. A year ago, Dr. Mr. Tomko gave the 20th anniversary Spring Humanities Lecture, and his talk was titled, "Why Are We Here?" My talk is titled, "What is the Point of Education?" If you think about it, I'm just asking the same question as Dr. Tomko. Why are you here? What's the point of education? Why are you here in college? It's the same talk. Now, my answer to the question is going to be different from the answer that Dr. Mr. Tomko gave, mostly because I didn't watch the whole of his video. So I don't know what he said. Actually, my answer might surprise you. You're here in college. This is my answer. Why are you here? Why are you here in college? And my answer is, you're here in college to fall in love. How's that going, Eddie? Look, it seems like I'm coming up with another great answer on my own, but again, I'm just recycling what my previous colleagues have said. 2 years ago, Dr. Moreland and Dr. Smith came and they gave a talk about romance on campus. Okay, so we're less than 5 minutes into the talk, and already I've stolen from Dr. Mr. Tomko and from Anna Moreland, so it's going well so far. I should probably try to say something original, right? I should try to say something original. What's the point of education? Let me start with the distinction. We often mean by education something like acquiring skills, or memorizing facts, or training for a profession. But I want to talk with you tonight about something different, something that the ancient Greeks called paideia. Paideia means a holistic education. It means learning what it takes to live as a human being. It doesn't aim at creating a productive worker, but it has as its end the radical intellectual and moral and possibly even religious conversion that each one of us must accomplish in a personal and decisive way. Paideia is about growing up as a human being. The word paideia actually comes from the Greek word pais, which means child. Paideia means the kind of education that helps us to grow up. Okay, even as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that 3 years ago, Dr. Cohenhoven gave a talk called "When Do We Grow Up?" So that's 3. Look, tonight I want to think with you about genuine education. And I want to do it by thinking with you about some things that Plato has to say. Actually, I want to think with you about what Plato has to say about education, but we're going to take a rather unusual path. I want to spend time reflecting on Plato's erotic dialogues. Most of the time, when you think about education and Plato, you think about the allegory of the cave in Plato's Republic, which he says explicitly is an image of education. But the Symposium and the Phaedrus, two dialogues that I love dearly, right, are about love. And what I want to say tonight is that, as I said already, right, the point of education is to fall in love. Rather than emphasize education as a practice of mastery, hard work, and skill acquisition, I want to think with you about the unexpected connection between education and ecstasy, between learning and the loss of a certain kind of control. Now, Plato called this loss of control theomania, which translates to divine madness. I'm going to come back to this idea. We've got a guide. Our guide is going to be the unparalleled 20th century German philosopher and Thomist Josef Pieper. If you're a humanities student, you're probably familiar with Pieper. He wrote such works as Leisure, the Basis of Culture, The Silence of St. Thomas, Essays on the Virtues. But I want to introduce you to one of his less well-known works. It's a book called Divine Madness. The English subtitle is Plato's Case Against Secular Humanism. And the book is a series of philosophical meditations upon a pronouncement that Socrates makes midway through the dialogue Phaedrus. And here's what he says. The highest good comes to us in the manner of mania, madness, bestowed on us as a divine gift. The highest goods come to us in the manner of mania, bestowed to us as a divine gift. Now, Pieper's central claim in this book is that the various experiences of divine madness that Plato lists in the Phaedrus reveal nothing less than the meaning of human existence and the proper end of human education. So in the dialogue, Socrates discusses four kinds of divine madness: prophecy, catharsis, poetic creation, and erotic love, each of which consists in what Pieper calls a God-given state of being beside oneself. A God-given state of being beside oneself. Now, in these dialogues, Plato lays out for us a fundamental tension in the human being, a central paradox that constitutes our relationship to the world. On the one hand, the human being experiences freedom as a kind of self-determination. I choose for myself who it is that I will be. Here's Pieper. He says, man is indeed of such a kind as to possess his own freedom and self-determination. He is able and also obliged to examine critically everything he encounters. He is above all able and obliged to determine based on insight his own life. This is the Platonic and Socratic wisdom of the early dialogues, ones you probably read in your philosophy class, like the Apology and the Phaedo. This is one of my favorite images. If you go into the Humanities Lounge, you should come into, you should say hi to Laura Klee, you should come and have a snack, right? And then you should look at the art on the wall, and tucked away, there's the giant art that is Dr. Perez's. He wanted the giant poster in there. And then tucked away in the corner is this painting of The Death of Socrates by Jacques-Louis David. It's a neoclassical painting. I love this painting. This is a painting of the moment of Socrates' death. Look at the painting. Socrates is perfectly in control of himself as the moment that he reaches for the hemlock, he's about to drink that will end his life. And all around him, his students are falling into pieces. Right? David uses, oh, that's not what we wanted to do. Let's see if this works. Oh, yeah, look at that. David, look at these guys. They're all over the place. Look at him. He's that's no good. I like this guy. That guy's my favorite. One of the things that's amazing about this painting is you can see in the background that Socrates, he sent away his wife, Xanthippe, his kids, and his dad. Right? But Socrates, no, he's in the middle of a dialogue. He's doing philosophy at the very moment that he's reaching for the hemlock that will end his life, while all around him everyone falls apart. This is an ideal of learning and of wisdom as self-control and overcoming the things that get in our way, right? I also like this image a lot because it means that if you decide to study philosophy, then you get to have really amazing abs. I think it just happens. So I don't think that's true of literature. Okay, so on the one hand, I'm just saying, there's different disciplines. They come out with different. Okay, on the one hand, the human being, right, is constituted by a kind of freedom of self-determination. Now, on the other hand, what it means to be a human being is to experience ecstatic dispossession. Here's Pieper again. At the same time, he says, the human being is integrated into the whole of reality in such a way that she can very well be shaken out of her self-possession, and so long as the human being on her part does not barricade herself in refusal, also in such a form that in the very loss of self-possession, there is bestowed on her a fulfillment not achieved in any other way. This is the Platonic Socratic wisdom of the erotic dialogues, of the Phaedrus and of the Symposium. And so I want to turn to these dialogues now and explore with you what the account we might find there about eros and ecstasy, about love and madness, has to teach us about a more profound kind of education. A form of learning we might miss if we think that education has only to do with cultivating rational control and self-determination. So let's talk about the Phaedrus, okay? How many of you have read the Phaedrus before? Okay, cool. Like a third of you, okay. The Phaedrus is a Platonic dialogue, and in the beginning of the Phaedrus, we find Socrates and Phaedrus, about whom the dialogue is named, strolling along outside the city walls of Athens. The day is glorious. It's a day like today. The cicadas are singing. The water of the stream they follow is clear and cool and especially delightful. So Socrates and Phaedrus, they slip off their sandals. They wade through the water until they come upon a lovely tree. There's some shade, a little breeze, and grass to lie down on. With their heads by the trunk and their feet in the stream, the place seems ideal for playful banter. Soon the talk turns to a speech that Phaedrus recently heard from the famed rhetorician Lysias, and the topic of that speech was erotic love. Now think for a minute, by the way, this is like a cheat code to your philosophy classes, okay? So don't tell anyone I told you, but anytime you study a Platonic dialogue, the setting and the introduction gives you the key to unlock the whole of the dialogue, okay? So in the beginning of Phaedrus, what we have is Phaedrus and Socrates going outside the city. Now think what that might mean. What kind of things do we associate with a city? A city is busy. It's the place of business. Nature, by contrast, is a place of leisure. The city is a place of exchange, of negotiation, people pursuing their interests in calculating ways, in rational ways. In Greek, the distinction is between these two words, skole and askolia. Yeah? Those words mean business, leisure, skole, and askolia, business. Now, in Greek, the Greeks, I don't say they're wiser than us in general, but sometimes their language reflects a kind of wisdom that we've lost. The way in which the Greeks define business, that word askolia, it has that alpha privative in the beginning, the same thing that we find at the beginning of, say, atheism. So theism means belief in God. Atheism means not a belief not in God or not believing in God. In the same way, notice that the Greek word for business means not leisure. That means the priority is given in the Greek imagination to leisure first. The same is true in Latin. Otium is the Latin word for leisure. Neg is to negate. Negotium, negotiating, is the word for business. In leisure, things are done for their own sake. In business, things have an exchange value. This is why business is stressful, because business involves managing and coordinating instrumental goods, goods that are for the sake of some further ends. Now, one of the wonderful things about natural beauty is its gratuity. It's not for something else. So many of you came into my class today and said, I'm so happy because it's so beautiful outside today, right? It's just beautiful because it is, yeah? And that gratuity lifts you up, right? The business, work, negotiation, exchange. Shoot, I've wandered into McCarraher territory. Incidentally, look at that headshot. That is good. Where is he? He's somewhere around. That's a good.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, yeah. Thank you, actually. That's really... So Socrates and Phaedrus, they're laying by the stream, they're talking, and one of the fundamental questions that they want to ask concerns whether, if they're talking about leisure and business, and one of the questions they want to ask is erotic love essentially selfish? Now, it's common to think of love, especially desirous love, erotic love, as a particularly intense form of selfishness, the pursuit of self-interest. Assume for a moment that this is what love is, that Eros names our own sort of selfish, self-centered, grasping and wanting to take to ourselves in order to satisfy some need. Then what would the best form of some kind of relationship between two people who have this kind of desire for one another be? And the answer of the dialogue, like I think our answer in many ways, is the best form would be a contract. You and I lay out the terms of what we want. We define the relationship. And we strike a deal. And from a self-interested perspective, this makes sense. Each party gets what he or she wants, and nobody gets hurt. This is essentially Lysias's view. Lysias gives a speech on behalf of the erotic negotiator. I'm going to summarize his argument. He says, look, if people get involved with one another because they're in love, they're not in control of what they do. Eros, he says, involves a kind of madness. It's the loss of rational, calculating control. Think of what your roommate did, like before spring break, because they found that girl or that guy at that party, right? Madness, right? It doesn't make any sense. And the results of this kind of madness is a whole host of problems, says Lysias. We hurt one another. We do things that we regret later. We send texts we really shouldn't have, right? We say things we shouldn't have. And then he loves us too. We can't tolerate the other person's independence. We can't treat them like a real person, so we want to keep them weak and controlled. So, love is crazy, he says. It's better to opt out. Now notice that in Lysias's way of approaching love, the presumed ideal is self-mastery, control over our emotions by a kind of rational calculation. And if this is the case, then the best sort of relationship is one of negotiated consent. Look what he says. This is Lysias. He says, this sort of thing is not supposed to cause any harm, and really, it should work to the benefit of both sides. It's a contract, negotiation, right? Minimize harm, maximize return. The problem with Lysias' dualism between passion and reason, between eros and self-control, is that Lysias has forgotten that there's a kind of being beyond oneself, a kind of madness that is not irrational or sub-rational, but rather supra-rational, is something more than what reason can ascend to. And so Socrates, in responding to the Lysias speech, has this to say. There's no truth to that story that when a lover is available to you, you should give your favors to a man who doesn't love you instead. That's what Lysias was arguing. Because he's in control of himself while the lover has lost his head. That would have been fine to say if madness were bad, pure and simple. But in fact, this is the key, right? Socrates says, the best things we have come from madness, from mania, when it is given as a gift of the god. And such gifts, as I already said, as Plato illuminates in the Phaedrus, are prophecy, catharsis, poetry, and eros. But the highest of these, he says, is eros, is love. Okay, I've been talking about eros for a while, so we should probably define what it means, right? And to do so, we're going to turn to another one of Plato's erotic dialogues. As many of you, my current students know, my favorite of all of Plato's writings, the Symposium. How many of you read the Symposium? Okay. That's awesome. We're doing something right at Villanova. Many of you have done that with me, haven't you? I'm doing something right at Villanova, okay. Okay. What's the dialogue about? Symposium literally means drinking together. Drinking together. The symposium is a drinking party. Here's the scene of the dialogue. Agathon, the handsome and brilliant young playwright, has just won first place at an Athenian theater festival for his first play that he ever wrote as well. And so to celebrate, he throws a party, and he invites all the beautiful elite of the Athenian aristocracy, the most talented artists, the most well-connected politicians, the most brilliant thinkers, and they spend the night at his place drinking and talking about love and lying on couches 2 by 2, as one does. Everyone seems to be at ease and the wine is flowing, but the atmosphere is one of banter and verbal performance. And one of the partygoers suggests that each of them should go around in the circle and give speeches in praise of the god Eros, love. Now for these Greeks, Eros was not simply an emotion or a biological drive. Rather, it was something divine. To be sure, the sophisticated elites who were gathered there at Agathon's party had various reservations about popular piety. But still, there's a sense, you can sense it in the dialogue, that as they speak, they're speaking of something more original and more transcendent than mere emotion. There's a kind of weight, a kind of force. There's something about Eros that's important. Now, the two most moving, memorable, and meaningful speeches are given by Aristophanes, a comic playwright and satirist, and by Socrates. And it's significant that they both present their speeches as origin myths of Eros. Where did Eros come from? Okay. Let's talk about the Aristophanes myth first. Here's how Aristophanes begins his speech. In the beginning, human beings were completely round, with twice the appendages they now have. 4 arms, 4 legs, 2 faces, and 2 sets of genitals. This is what Aristophanes thinks that human beings were like in the beginning. And then he continues, whenever they set out to run fast, they thrust out all their 8 limbs, the ones they had then, and spun rapidly, the way gymnasts do cartwheels, by bringing their legs around straight. What are you laughing at? Okay, that's an objectively funny image. Remember Dr. and Mrs. Tomka's lecture was entitled, What Are You Laughing At? So I guess we're adding her to the list of humanities professors now. Look, Aristophanes means this as a funny image for what it was to be a human being in the beginning, but he also means it to be an image of wholeness. A circle is an image of perfection. It's a reflection on the spheres, the divine spheres that move perfectly in a circle. There's a kind of heavenly divinity about these human beings. And Aristophanes goes on to tell us that not only were they circle people, but they also were terrible in strength and power. And what's more, Aristophanes says, because they had this power and perfection, it was wedded to a kind of ambition, a great ambition. And the original circle humans tried to ascend to the heaven to attack the gods. This is a dark moment in Greek prehistory. Now, Zeus gets the gods into council, and he realizes he's in something of a pickle. He can't just destroy the human beings, because that would eliminate all the worship and the sacrifices that the gods need, right? So he comes up with a plan. He cuts the human beings in 2, right down the middle. And in one stroke, he dissipates their strength, breaking the perfection of the circle, and he increases the worship. You've got twice as many lovers of the gods now. Right? So he cuts each human being in half, and then he has Apollo turn their heads around so that our heads face the open wounds of the splitting that we were. And he's like, Apollo, just gather up that wound into the belly button, right? And like seal it up. And then whenever you look in the mirror and you see your belly button, you can be reminded, right, that you once had this perfection and now you're just half a person. Here's Aristophanes. Since their natural form had been cut in two, each one longed for its own other half. And so they would throw their arms about each other, weaving themselves together, wanting to grow together. Now, the problem is that no one got anything done, and so they died from hunger and thirst. But Zeus had this stroke of genius, this is why they're smiling, because he moves the genitals around to the fronts. And this is brilliant, because now the two halves can come together, and for a little bit of time, depending on, well, okay, you can experience a kind of unity or wholeness again. And then you can go back to your business, right? It's a brilliant plan. The halves come together, they unite temporarily, and then they go back to their business. And so Aristophanes says, this then is the source of our desire to love each other. Love is born into every human being. It calls back the halves of our original nature together. It tries to make one out of two and heal the wound of human nature. It's beautiful. At least it sounds beautiful. But Aristophanes has smuggled in a dark joke. Notice what he's saying. Love, he says, is born from an inherent imperfection. It's an expression of a lack or a wound in the self. In sex, we desire a union realized in the embrace of intercourse, but this is only a poor substitute, a shadow of the perfection that we once previously possessed but can never have again. In other words, Aristophanes says, we don't know how to read our desires. We think we know what we want when we want, but we don't know what we want. We want something more than sexual intimacy, but all too often we feel this desire and we settle for sex because we don't know what else it is that we really want. It's obvious, he says, that the soul of every lover longs for something else. His soul cannot say what it is, but like an oracle, it has a sense of what it wants, and like an oracle, it hides behind a riddle. According to Aristophanes, in Plato's Symposium, eros is the expression of a deep longing, a longing for a kind of wholeness that goes far beyond us, that can barely articulate itself, but that names a fundamental woundedness about our being. Now, when Socrates gets his turn to speak, he does something strange. Instead of giving his speech directly, he tells us that he learned everything he knows about the art of love from a priestess named Diotima. And Diotima is important for three reasons. First, as a woman, the first female speaker in the whole of the symposium, she introduces the idea of heteronomy, or difference, into the discussion. Second, and also as a woman, she introduces for the first time in this long dialogue, these exchanges of speeches on erotic love, she introduces the idea, the consideration of pregnancy as a possibility or a consequence of love. And third, as a priestess, she knows something of the divine, and so she can teach us something about the transcendent quality of eros. Now, Diotima, like Aristophanes, is going to tell a myth, but her myth is different from the one that Aristophanes tells. Here's the myth that Diotima says about the origin of eros. Diotima says, look, it's Aphrodite's birthday, and the gods throw a party. Now, Poros is the god of plenty or wealth or excess or festivity. And what does Poros do at this party? He gets really drunk and he falls asleep out in the garden. And along comes Peña. Peña is the goddess of lack, the goddess of poverty. Don't think too hard about why you'd have a goddess of poverty, but she wasn't invited to the party because you don't want poverty around at the party. So she sneaks into the garden, she sees Porus lying there drunk, and she sleeps with him. And the result of this coupling, the birth that comes from this coupling, is a child, Eros. And because Eros is the son of both abundance and absence, of plenty and poverty, he inherits characteristics from both of his parents. Far from being beautiful and fully divine, as people think he is, Eros is actually ugly and needy and impoverished, like his mother. But at the same time, he's brave and resourceful and powerful, like his father. Eros, erotic love, in other words, says Socrates, says Diotima, is something in the middle. The Greek word for middle is metaxou, something in the between. Not divine, but rather a mediator with the divine. Not beautiful and perfect, but something that seeks for what's beautiful and perfect. And indeed, because he was conceived on the day of Aphrodite's birthday, he is by nature a lover of beauty. Just think about the fact that when beauty comes on the scene, when you experience a beautiful person or a beautiful sunset or a beautiful work of art, something is stirred in you. It's beauty that calls out a kind of desire in you. When beauty comes on the scene, desire is born. Okay, we're like more than halfway through the talk, but finally, at last, here we come to the connection between Eros and education. Zachary, we got there. Okay. Like Eros in the myth, the human being, according to Socrates, is characterized above all by being a between creature. Think about how animals don't ask questions. That's because it's not just that they aren't wise, they don't even know to seek for wisdom. But then Socrates says, think about how gods, on the other hand, also don't ask questions. But the reason gods don't ask questions is because they already possess wisdom. You don't go out seeking what you've never lost. No god is a philosopher or seeker after wisdom, for he is wise already. Neither did the ignorant seek after wisdom, for herein is the evil of ignorance, that he who is neither good nor wise is nevertheless satisfied with himself. But human beings, of course, are neither animals nor gods. We're something in the middle. We live or dwell between wisdom and ignorance. So just as Eros is between wealth and poverty, so too to be a lover of wisdom is to be between ignorance and wisdom. This is why Diotima says that Eros is a philosopher. Philosophy means a love, philos, of wisdom, Sophia, philia Sophia, a love of wisdom. Now notice on this account that love, Eros, is indeed a lack. We don't possess perfect wisdom. But unlike what Aristophanes said, that lack is a total lack where we're seeking for a perfection we no longer have, a wound, Diotima's idea of Eros is that love is a very kind of mysterious lack. It's already in a kind of intimate communication, an intimate relationship with the very thing that it's seeking. It recognizes beauty, even as it goes and looks for it. Now, Diotima asks Socrates a very important question. And she says, it's the same question that Aristophanes asked, right? What is it that you want when you want? What does love want? What good is love? It wants beauty, but what will it have when it has beauty? Well, Diotima says, in the most general terms, what do we want when we want? And our answer is we want to have good things. We want to be happy. This, says Diotima, is the answer to Aristophanes' riddle about the oracle of Eros. Love wants to possess the good forever. Now, I know this seems like a simple idea, but there's a really profound thing buried in it. Contrast it with Aristophanes. We do not simply want wholeness. We don't want more of the same. We don't even want ourselves. What we want in all of our wanting is a good that lies beyond our anticipation, our control, or our mastery. This is why for Plato, eros, love, is ecstatic. That word ecstatic, ecstasis, to stand outside of oneself. Love draws us outside of ourselves in an unending search for what is good, wherever it is that we can find it. That's what love wants. Now, what will happen if we fall in love, if we possess this good? What does it look like? Does it look like grasping it and taking to ourselves the good that we find? Diotima has a really strange answer. The purpose, she says, of love is not to get something for ourselves, but rather to give birth in the presence of beauty. It's a very strange idea, to give birth in the presence of beauty. But think about it for a second. I just said that love wants the good and it wants it forever. Think about how birth is linked to beauty and immortality. You might not have ever thought about this before, but think about it, right? Bodily pregnancy is the result of a physical desire for the beautiful other. And it produces a child beyond the parents. And in the physical replication of the parents, the species, the family, persists across time. That's an image in time of eternity. Right? Reproduction in the presence of beauty. Now, Diotima's strange idea is that we're not just pregnant in our bodies, but we're also pregnant in our souls. And that soul pregnancy is the result of philosophical desire for beauty that produces a good beyond itself. And her idea is that we all have something good in us that transcends ourselves. And the purpose of love and of life and of education is to bring this into being. What it means to love wisdom, to pursue a good beyond ourselves, is to be productive of this good. So this is the paradox that Diotima is laying out for us to consider. Possessing the good forever does not mean grasping for ourselves something that we're afraid or terrified of losing. Rather, according to Diotima, it takes the form of a kind of dispossession, a gift of ourselves, a making something new to be. Now, if Diotima is right about what eros means, then think about how this differs from other accounts of love and education. I'm going to suggest 3 ways in which Plato, Diotima, Socrates' account of love changes how we might think about education. Why we're here. First, most of your teaching functions on the model, think about this, is this true or not, of a teacher, much like I'm doing right now, I recognize, standing up in front of you and putting information into your minds, right? And you furiously write down the notes that the teacher had in her notes that she says and that you take in and then that you write down, right? That's the model, that's a model of education. But Socrates thinks that this is a horrible mistake. Many will remember from reading the Apology, right, that Socrates famously says, I can't teach you anything because I don't have anything to give, right? So he doesn't have anything to give. But more importantly, and this is really important, I cannot stress this enough, Diotima thinks that this is a bad idea because, and this is her central idea, you are already pregnant. You, Nick, you're pregnant. I don't know why you're laughing, Hunter. You're pregnant too. Congratulations. You're already pregnant. All right. I'm really glad that Dr. Ogle is here. And the reason I'm so glad is this is a good occasion to say that she has forgotten more about Augustine than I've ever known. No, Dr. Ogle is pregnant both in body and in soul. It's also true that she's amazing. Okay, so if Diotima was right, then like Dr. Ogle, you're pregnant already, right? But inside yourself. Then how does that change real education? In genuine learning, A teacher does not just put information into you. She helps you to deliver what it is that you already have. This is why Socrates says that what it means to be a good teacher is to be a midwife, right? To help you give birth. A midwife is someone who helps to give birth to what it is that you're already doing. The midwife doesn't give birth. You give birth. And the midwife is there to say, you could do it, right? Keep going. I believe in you, right? Look over here, right? Okay. So the first point is this. Genuine education looks like giving birth, as strange as it might sound, and a good teacher is a midwife. Okay. Second way that the diathema changes a way of understanding education. As Aristotle reminds us, children are a common good, something that bonds two people together, right? The two people came together because they fell in love with the beauty of the other, but what came from them was a third beyond themselves that now they share in common. In the same way, truth is a common good. It doesn't belong to anyone. It's all of ours. And genuine education means that there's a mutual seeking after a good that is not exhausted when you possess it, but rather the more you have it and the more you share it, the more your share in it increases. This is the only slide. I've said some weird things tonight. The only slide I'm really worried about Dr. Tomko kicking me off the stage. But genuine education is thoroughly erotic. If we understand what Plato means by eros, we limit eros, the love for beauty and what exceeds ourselves, just to sex. But sex is only an image, a tiny image of what it is that genuine eros is in the Platonic scheme. Learning is about progressively falling in love and training your desire toward what is more and more ultimate. And this means that genuine education begins in an encounter with beauty. It also means that real learning is liberating in the same way that true love is liberating. Not because you've acquired new skills, not because you found something that completes some lack you have in yourself, but rather, like falling in love, because you've been surprised by a good that's changed everything. And the only possible response to that, this is Plato and Diotima and Socrates, is to try to make yourself and your life beautiful as well. All right, let's go back to the Phaedrus. If you keep reading the Phaedrus, you'll come across a famous image of the soul as a charioteer and a team of winged horses that long to return to the heavenly vision of beauty that they once feasted upon in the train of the gods. I don't have time to go through the whole myth, wild and beautiful and deep and mysterious as it is, but what's essential about the myth is the affirmation of something eternal, transcendent, something genuinely otherworldly about the soul. Lysias's speech, the one about negotiated exchange, assumed an entirely this-worldly view of the human being. What Socrates is now saying is that unless there's something eternal about the human being, then love is ridiculous. To deny transcendence of the soul means that we should stick with love as an exchange, as Lysias proposes. But the experience of beauty, encountered through the divine mania of eros, reminds us, through longing, about the eternal end of our being, an end that has been obscured, but not altogether forgotten. Here's Josef Pieper and the way he describes Plato's wisdom in this dialogue. The human being is lost through its own offense, the perfection originally reserved for him as part of his supernatural destiny. And in consequence, he's now incessantly chasing after the original ideal form. The primordial condition being at the same time the true goal and end of human existence constitutes the object of man's remembrance as well as his longing. His remembrance as well as his longing. Now, what is it that brings about this remembrance and longing of the eternal? Plato's answer is beauty. It's beauty that does this. And why beauty? Pieper says this: nothing evokes this remembrance more intensely than beauty. This is a specific characteristic of beauty. In its power to lead towards a reality beyond the here and now, beyond immediate perception, it cannot be compared to anything in this world. And why? Because of all of the things that are both invisible and visible, or rather, of all the things that we can love, beauty is both invisible and visible. We can love the truth, which we cannot see. We can love wisdom, which we cannot see. We can love things like we can love ice cream. We can love a good something that we could see, a painting, something like that, right? But beauty straddles that divide between the visible and the invisible. Beauty is both immaterial and material, or rather, by way of our senses, it reminds us or leads us through to what is more than merely sensible. Wisdom, by contrast, can't be seen. And Pieper says, Plato adds, if wisdom were visible in the same way that beauty were, then, quote, a fearsome love would be enkindled, a love apt to upset or destroy our existential structure, to transport us in total rapture outside our earthly existence. So this is the idea. If we could see truth in the same way that we can experience wisdom, it would wreck us. It would wreck us. This is the Ecstasy of St. Teresa. It's probably arguably the most famous work by the Italian Baroque master Gian Lorenzo Bernini. By the way, it was Dr. Grubiak who made the excellent suggestion to include the statue as part of my talk today. So thank you, Dr. Grubiak.
You're welcome.
The built world is very beautiful. Why did Dr. Grubiak suggest Bernini's Ecstasy of St. Teresa for a talk on love? Often when images or pictures of Bernini's statue are shown, they're shown like this, in a zoomed in image of St. Teresa's face. I mean, look, there's no denying that this is an image of ecstasy. Who was this woman that Bernini carved in such a state of rapture? St. Teresa of Avila was a Spanish Carmelite, a nun, a cloistered nun. She lived in the 16th century. She was a brilliant writer, she was a fierce reformer, and she was a mystic. And in his statue, Bernini captures in exquisite detail a scene which Teresa relates in her autobiography. Here's what she says happened to her. Beside me on the left appeared an angel in bodily form. He was not tall but short and very beautiful. And his face was so aflame that he appeared to be one of the highest ranks of angels, who seemed to be all on fire. And in his hands I saw a great golden spear, and at the iron tip there appeared to be a point of fire. The spear he plunged into my heart several times so that it penetrated to my entrails, to my guts, my innermost being. And when he pulled it out, I felt that he had taken them with it. And it left me utterly consumed by the great love of God. The pain was so severe that it made me utter several moans. The sweetness caused by this intense pain is so extreme that one cannot possibly wish it to cease. Nor is one's soul content with anything but God. This is not a physical, but a spiritual pain, though the body has some share in it, even a considerable share. This is astonishing writing, and the statue also is an astonishing capturing of this moment in St. Teresa's life, of this blending, right, of incredible longing, even suffering, a passion. Right? Think about how we're passionately in love with someone. If you've never been in love with someone so much that it hurts, then you haven't experienced what Plato is talking about when he talks about eros, or like a fraction of what Teresa is talking about when she talks about this love. Right? So love hurts, but also you cannot want anything less than that once you felt it. It's an incredible depiction of what it is that Plato is talking about. I should say, by the way, that when I was a doctoral student, I took a class with Dr. Hughes. I don't know where Dr. Hughes on medieval mysticism, where I think we read the Interior Castle, I think, in that class. So that's where I first learned about St. Teresa. Okay, look, we're almost at the end here, okay? You made it through only a few more minutes. And in full disclosure, I don't really have time to do justice to Dr. Perez. But he did a great job as an MC tonight, didn't he? Yeah. Also, actually, that's not fair. Nietzsche, who Dr. Perez works on, has a lot to say about Eros. And in particular, he says, one of the things that Christianity has done is it's poisoned Eros. But look at that, think about that picture. Think about that statue of St. Teresa. Right, in love, right? And tell me that that's poisoned Eros. It's the celebration, the elevation of the erotic into the very highest possibility for the human being. Is that everyone? All right, there's also Dr. Sweeney. Okay. Where is Dr. Sweeney? God, he didn't even come. All right, whatever. He is there too. No, Dr. Sweeney is actually, along with Dr. Clausen, my oldest friend here at Villanova. So there's something about him that's good, probably. Okay, back to Pieper. Wisdom can't be seen, but if we could, what would happen? It would enkindle a love that would destroy our existential structure or transport us in total rapture outside our earthly existence. Isn't that a perfect description of what it is that St. Teresa relates and Bernini captures? Okay. I'm wrapping up now. Okay, Tino, you made it. We're almost there. Okay. Love intends, longs for, seeks beauty. And what does beauty give us? Not satisfaction, but promise. Not consummation, but wings. We come again to the connection between Eros and learning, between Eros and Josef Pieper is about to talk about philosophy in the quote I'm about to show you, but just substitute philosopher for students, right? A philosopher is just someone who seeks after the truth in its original meaning, right? Here's what Pieper says: lovers and philosophers are connected by special ties. Both erotic excitement and genuine philosophical quest trigger a momentum that in this finite existence can never be stilled. I want to leave you with an image of education that one of my teachers, the philosopher William Desmond, has given to me. Think about an encounter with beauty as an advent. Advent means in-breaking, a coming towards, right? The breaking through. Beauty is like, the encounter with the experience of beauty is like the in-breaking into your everyday business, right? Of something that's excessive, that transforms you. It converts you. If you let it, it can change your life forever. You could reorient your life based on experience of an advent of beauty. But, and this is the crucial idea, right? The advent is an invitation to respond. It's not something to sit or receive passively. It invites you to respond. Real education is the movement from advent to adventure. A stretching in the between that desires out of a full lack, that longs for what is disclosed ambiguously, mysteriously, but truly in the midst of things. And if you learn in that way, you wed education to Eros, then you step into the dangerous and adventurous space of ecstatic self-transcendence. To quote Josef Pieper for the last time, hope is the condition of the human person's existence as a knowing subject. A condition that by its very nature cannot be fixed. It's neither comprehension and possession, nor is it simply non-possession, but it's not yet possession. The knowing subject, all of you, me, your teachers, the knowing subject is a pilgrim, a viator, someone who is on the way. And this, I want to suggest, is the point of genuine education. to be transformed as we journey in hope together, as we go on pilgrimage in this life towards truth, goodness, and beauty in love. Thank you.
My ears had heard of Dr. Camacho's teaching excellence. Now my eyes have seen it, and I repent and despise myself. I'll never be able to deliver a talk like that. But I think I lied to you when I said you could steal the show, because that was a marvelous and excellent talk. It's still the shop, though. We have a few minutes of questions. I'll give you maybe 20-ish seconds to kind of gather your thoughts, and then we'll have some time for questions. Any comments, curiosities? What is this discussion on education stirring in you at the moment? Eddie, do I see a half?
I'm just waiting for you to give me the go-ahead.
Okay. You can go ahead.
Are you sure?
Yes.
First, Dr. Camacho, thank you. Second, I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but I'll ask it anyway to be a jerk. There are some of us here, including myself, who after we leave university, after we leave college, perhaps we won't be in academic roles to continue learning as a profession. And so I guess my question would be, now that we've been infected with the eros of education, where should we look to find the next midwife for our intellectual pregnancy? Please dissect that into a question you can answer.
I feel like I might need to clarify some things, but we can talk after. Okay. I'll be honest, it's difficult. It's really difficult. I think that one of the things that is a great gift of these 4 years, if you let it be 4 years that you're rapidly leaving behind, Eddie, is that it provides the occasion, the opportunity for the possibility of contemplative reflection in community with people whom you love and who love you and who love you enough to give you existential crises and to give you weird ideas and to challenge you to read things you wouldn't otherwise. But the fact of the matter is that even in college, and this is what I'm most worried about, even in, think about your existence as a college student. You don't have time to think about what you had to carve out just to be here tonight. Your mind's already racing ahead to the work you need to get done, the things, the applications you have to do, the internships you got to line up for this summer, right? And Josef Pieper calls this it's a haunting phrase. In Leisure, the Basis of Culture, he calls this the totalitarian world of work. The totalitarian world of work. I'll be honest with you, Eddie. I think it takes a kind of heroic courage to resist that in our contemporary culture. I think I think that you, in particular, are up to the task of doing that. But part of it is that part of what these 4 years are meant to be is to form the kind of habits and to fall in love so that you're willing to risk what it takes to actually carve out this. I know you wanted a practical answer. I'm giving you a theoretical answer. The risk actually, and what does it look like practically? It means imagining the kinds of goods that you have that go beyond thinking of yourself as a producer or a consumer. It's Dr. McCarraher again. To think that some of the possible goods of your life would mean staying at home when you could be going out or you could be putting in more hours and instead reading something. I know that sounds, in a certain sense, that's like, it's like nothing, but that's the whole point. The action of contemplation is a creating space in your life to actually reflect upon the things that matter. Let me add one other thing. This is really important, okay? That the world of contemplation, the world of leisure, is not respite or rest or recovering from work. That's what we think when we hear the word leisure. Leisure looks more like active, festive celebration with the people whom you love in conversation or just celebration of the things that matter, right? So how do you carve out room for that? Right? In religious traditions, this is called the Sabbath, right? It's not a day, right, that's for a kind of like dour reflection or a day to like drink beer and watch football, or a day to like go on a walk for your health or something. It's a day actually of a kind of putting aside the pressing needs of all of the things that are crowding in and wanting your attention, and instead being with friends or looking at art or just watching a sunset or being under a tree, right? These are like, just because they are simple doesn't mean that they're easy. And the reason they're not easy is that the whole world of business wants to capitalize on turning on our frenetic totalitarian world of work, right? So we have all the tools. It means having friends who love the things that you love, and then being courageous enough, right? Being in love enough with the good to make room and say, these other things that are so important and good in their own sphere are not as important as this.
Great question. Thank you, Eddie. Anybody else? Tell us your name.
Hi, I'm Amelia.
Hey, Amelia.
Glad to see you're still alive. Haven't seen you since like last semester.
I mean, I think that's on both of us, but okay.
Okay, so I really thought you were going to be at the Faith and Learning dinner. Me and Hannah, we saved you spot on your
Oh, good.
so excited. Wisdom and insight. We were excited to grow, and then you just.
What's the question? I don't know.
So you were talking a lot about how this is like as humans, we're striving. It is our love to we're constantly seeking wisdom. So if we're not actively seeking wisdom, if we didn't make the effort to come to this talk, are we in some way deficient in wisdom? Are we deficient in eros or something? Or is there some way that we can how can we become more erotic?
It's actually a great question. How to become more erotic. Okay, despite what you might see on I don't know, Instagram or TikTok or wherever, right? I actually think that our age is an age that's incredibly deficient in eros. It's a thoroughly de-erotic age. And that's because we've actually confused that longing for something deeper, something more, something transcendent with sex, right? A kind of collapse of that longing that, because it's painful to hold open to what exceeds us, because loving in that way means a kind of dilation or a stretching or an opening of our heart and soul, right? It's a lot easier to say, no, love means I have a number of choices in front of me and I just take what I want and then I grasp it and then I'm satisfied there's a never-ending stream of getting what it is that I want, right? And so I actually think that a deficiency in eros is it's one of the things that animated starting to teach the Problem of Love class, because I actually think it's impossible as a human being not to be a lover. Think of the very opening of Augustine's Confessions, right? Augustine says what it is to be a human being is to have a heart that's restless, right? This is what constitutes us as finite beings. We're not sunken in the kind of biological pattern of experience that lower beings are, but we also don't just perfectly possess everything that's good and true and beautiful, right? We are in the middle, which means we're stretched or oriented by our very nature to that. But the problem is that can be covered over and forgotten. And one of the ways that gets covered over and forgotten, and I'm sorry to say that I think a lot of our contemporary education does this, right, is by saying what's most important to me, right, is securing for myself in a frightening, fragile, and precarious world, right, the things that I think I might need because I'm afraid that without them I won't be fulfilled, secure, happy, right? And the only answer to that, the only possible answer to that is, you're missing out on falling in love. And when you fall in love, I mean with another person, when you fall in love with another person, it's the most thrilling, amazing, and terrifying thing. And it asks demands of you that you couldn't possibly anticipate. And if you could, you wouldn't fall in love in the first place. But there's nothing better than it, right? And life is like that. Life is like that. And I'm really worried about that closure, right? But I think the other great news, Amelia, is all around you, beauty is calling. I mean literally about Advent, right? Like we have to still ourselves. We have to cultivate a kind of silence, a kind of attentiveness, a kind of receptivity. That's the hard part, right? But as soon as you do, it's everywhere. Yeah?
Thank you. Yeah. Can you tell us your name?
I'm Alex. What advice would you give to like those enlightened students who are trying to encourage their classmates to recognize and like reflect on this totalitarian world of work that is like constantly suffocating them?
There's a lot of assumptions in that question. I don't consider myself enlightened, so I don't really. If I met an enlightened student, I would ask them to teach me. I think, as in so many things, right? What is? I think there's no. What do I want to say? You can't convince someone who doesn't want to be convinced. So the whole. I've been. One reason I love these Platonic dialogues is. In my own experience, and I know, Alex, in yours, that when you encounter something that transforms you, right, it changes how it is that you are. When think about maybe you've had an occasion, Alex or anyone, all of you now, think about if you've fallen in love with someone. Think about the way in which. If it's one way to know if that's genuine love, is that you now glow, right? There's something different about you. Your roommate, right, is commenting on like how you suddenly look really good all the time, right? Or like you don't seem to care about the things you did before. Now, one way to know that a love relationship is not a good one, right, is if you close in on yourself or with the other person. Right? And it becomes more enclosed. But one way to tell if a loving relationship is really good is that in and through your love for this other person, you suddenly, because you've experienced the advent of beauty in this particular person, you now start to see the whole world as possibly beautiful. You might have missed it, right? It's not that love blinds us or closes us down. It's that we open up actually in a genuine love relationship, right? Okay, I promise, Alex, I'm answering your question. I'm coming back to the question. Okay, so if you've experienced something about the good of a life of reflection upon what is good and true and genuinely human that lies outside the world's of grades and internships and networking and all of these things, right? Then the real test is just, is your life happier or not, right? Are you joyful or not, right? How many of you who became a humanities minor or major because there was someone else who seemed like their life was happier than a lot of the other Villanova students that you encounter all the time? I mean, like how many people, maybe you are, if you said no and you are that person for other people, right? Like the encounter with, the genuine encounter that makes us more, it makes us more. And so instead of convincing, think about it instead as a kind of invitation, an invitation that the way in which you live, if it's lived authentically, right, provides.
Great. Yeah, we have time for maybe 2 more questions. Can we go back there? Can you tell us your
Yes,
name?
Justin. So in the last chapter of Imur Masashi's Book of Five Rings, he talks about how in training and doing the things which is a true, almost like mindlessness. You just do it on instinct. How could you connect some of the philosophy that Imur Masashi infused into what he wants to give to his disciples with what you have talked about tonight?
I haven't read Five Rings, but I think that there is something, there's something equivalent in this idea of like sort of flow or this kind of mastery, a kind of activity that comes easily as a result of practice. Now, this is actually a really important idea. Look, it's just a fact that Plato is a much sexier philosopher than Aristotle. I think can we all agree about that? Okay. But Aristotle has his moments, okay? So one of the things that Aristotle says that I've always loved in the Nicomachean Ethics, which in many ways, much of the text, before you get to the very end, is a text about mastering yourself, mastering your passions by way of the cultivation of activities that develop into habits that settle into a kind of character, right? So if you act in a way in which you practice a kind of self-discipline, self-control, then you become a kind of temperate person. Or if you make small, courageous activities, then when the big moment comes, you've developed a courageous spirit, character, disposition, so you're able to make that courageous leap. Okay, but here's the important part, right? His claim is that the human being who is truly virtuous, right, it is both easy and pleasant for her to perform those activities. Right? It's both easy and pleasant for her to perform those activities, right? So when you think about someone who has practiced a long time at a sport and is excellent at it, right, they possess, when they're in the flow, when they're performing the activity well, they're acting out of themselves, so to speak, right? And so while the mastery led up to it, now it's something that they possess. Now, that's important and a really important thing. But what Plato is talking about with divine madness is yet a step further. It's something different. And the idea is something like this, right? That those are things that I accomplished on my own that now I live out of. But divine madness is a gift that comes to me from outside of myself that I cannot create, but I can prepare myself to receive. Those of you in the Judeo-Christian tradition will recognize this as this is grace. It's a gift that comes, that builds upon what it is that we already have, but can't be earned. It can only be prepared for, and you open yourself to it, but you can't anticipate or master it, otherwise it wouldn't be what it is. So that's yet a step further, what Plato is suggesting. And I want to suggest that learning begins when we risk that.
Thanks. There's two hands over there. If you might tell us your name.
I'm Mel, and this is Gabe. We're gonna have a few more questions.
Oh my gosh, okay, this is exciting.
Kind of similar, so.
Okay.
Mine was kind of like, we talk about these great academics in humanities, and we learn from great professors, but would you agree with the statement that, like, in your everyday life, you can, like, give birth in the presence of beauty with just, like, normal conversations with, like, normal people,
Sure,
non-academics?
Actually, that's probably the last place where it happens most of the time, but yeah.
And then, I guess Gabe says,
To add on to it, how do we find these midwives? How do we find these people who can help us get work?
We're all the way back to Eddie's question. Were you listening earlier to Eddie's? Yeah. Look, I hate to break it to you, but you guys are getting to the point where you've got to go out there and do this. Like that. This is the other side of, this is the whole advent to adventure, right? Like, I do think it's the case that, this is still happening to me all the time. Like one of the reasons I still cannot believe that I get to be a part of this incredible department, the humanities department, is that I'm constantly, my friends and colleagues are constantly showing me these incredible and beautiful ways of becoming something more, right? There's back to Aristotle again. What do you do? You find good friends. You have friends who have fallen in love, right? And then you do that thing that we love to talk about in the humanities department. You live together. Conviviality, right? You do life together. You celebrate together, you party together, you study together, you talk together, you disagree together, right? That's what you do, right? And you help each other to do this thing. Dr. Ogle and I have known each other since we were sitting in audiences like this when we were undergraduates. And now, like, we're still doing this thing together, right? Of trying to give birth to something beautiful in the way in which we think, in the kind of activities that we're involved in, and the lives we try to lead, right? You're gonna fail, and you're gonna have setbacks, and you're gonna have great, joyful experiences, right? And that's all part of it.
Great. Maybe our last question, Dave, can you tell us your name?
So you talked about this divine madness breaking in, and like causing this chaos in your life and something beautiful happening to you, and how it asks the response of us. Is there an adequate response that we can give to that grace? And how do we hope when it maybe feels like we can't adequately reciprocate that?
Yeah.
Like return that gift?
It's a fantastic question. And the short answer is you can't. You can't adequately reciprocate it. But I've thought a lot about what it would mean to be a good recipient of gifts for various reasons. Sometimes you receive gifts you don't want. Sometimes the gift that you get is not what you were hoping for. Sometimes a gift is a covert way to control you or to manipulate you, right? But in a genuine gift is given to you, even if you can't see it at first, to make you something more, right? And it seems to me like an adequate way to respond to a gift is to step into what it is that is being invited, which is just in this context, in the context of what we were talking about, in the gift of a disclosure of something more that reminds you in a kind of longing to seek to become a more authentic human being, right? What you do with your life is the response you make to the gift, right? I mean, sorry, the only adequate answer is make your life worthy as possible. It'll always exceed you. That's the nature of what's good and true and beautiful. We don't get to corner it. We don't get to possess it. It's always more than us. So we're always trying to live up to it. But in the process of doing that, right, your life becomes something beautiful. In Plato's Phaedrus, he says, your soul grows wings. It's a beautiful image. I think it's the right one, right? He says it's painful. It's painful to grow wings, right? But then you can soar. So thank you for a great question.
Let's thank Dr. Camacho for